Hello again, and welcome to the Castle Old Skull HAWK Moor project, exploring the secret history of Dungeons & Dragons, Greyhawk, and Blackmoor, as created by Gary Gygax and Dave Arneson. If you enjoy HAWK Moor, and you want to keep me around on YouTube, please like, comment, share, and subscribe. And so, in the end, in exploring the glacial rift of the frost giant Jarl, it all comes down to this. To capstone our Gygaxian Frost Giant series, we take a look at the deepest secrets, the Storm Giantess, the White Dragons, the overlooked victory carvings, a vague link between Chieftain Nosnra and the Temple of Elemental Evil, the trophies of the Jarl, the secret origin of brown mold, and more. Come, adventurers, let us put an end to this evil of the boreal lands of Greyhawk. For as we read in one of Gary's favorite tales, Jack the Giant Killer, by Joseph Jacobs from 1890, "Art thou that villain who killed my kinsman?" roared the giant. "Then I will tear thee with my teeth, suck thy blood, and grind thy bones to powder." Now that we have explored the mythic and weird fiction influences upon the background, setting, giants, and foremost fiends we have discovered throughout Gary Gygax's 1978 dungeon module, G2, Glacial Rift of the Frost Giant Jarl, we can now go deeper into the ice caves in search of other resonant pieces which bring the worlds of fiction under the united banner of classic Dungeons & Dragons. We have already looked briefly in this series at the yetis, who seem to have been partially inspired by the primitive snowfolk found in the Conan tale The Lair of the Ice Worm, written by L. Sprague de Camp and Lynn Carter. We know that the ice worm was nodded to by Gary's inclusion of the Remoraz, so it seems obvious that the yetis as well were also included to resonate with that story. The Yeti encountered in Module G2 are clearly more advanced than the baseline primitive creatures featured in the 1977 Monster Manual. The iconic Monster Manual Yetis do not use weapons or armor. In fact, the David C. Sutherland illustration shows the Monster Manual Yeti not only weaponless, but also breaking an adversary's spear while simultaneously destroying a shield. However, the advanced G2 Yetis serve as scouts to the Frost Giants, and they have a leader who skillfully wields a magic sword. They even tame snow leopards as their pets and hunting beasts. Beyond the Yetis, we also find some surviving hill giants from Nosnra's hill giant Steading, seeking audience with the Jarl. We learn indirectly that the heraldic symbol of Chief Nosnra is a golden skull, which reminds us of the Temple of Elemental Evil and Golden Skull. Meanwhile, the sigil of Jarl Grugnor is a silver or amber bear, perhaps depending upon the noble station of the treasure bearer. King Snor's device, by the way, is a flaming skull. So there is actually some heraldry to the giants, hidden there in the Greyhawk lore. There are stone giants in the glacial rift as well, and it is hinted that they are more impressed with the frost giants than they ever were with the hill giants. However, the description of the Steading dungeon does indicate that several stone giants have already been bought off with gold to serve the hill giants as miners. If you want to go into some of my campaign lore where I explain just how the neutral stone giants commonly find themselves as allies with their evil giant brothers and kindred, you can check out my Old Skull Steading companion book, available from Wonderland Imprints and DriveThruRPG. In our prior post and episode, we also took a look at one of the more enigmatic monsters found in the glacial rift, the ice toads of Sathagwa. Today, we are looking at the most exotic and mysterious monster found in the rift besides the toads, which is actually the brown mold. This monster is confusing to many readers unless they happen to be familiar with the old obscure novel The Sign of the Labrys by Margaret St. Clair. Dungeons & Dragons' brown mold is not identical to St. Clair's creation, but the direct inspirational origins that Gary took from there are very clear. Since that book is a bit rare and hard to track down and expensive, I will share some of the relevant passages from my own copy concerning what she calls the cryogenic fungus here. From various sections, we read the narrative in the Sign of the Labrys as follows. A chill air was rushing in. Kira, bent over, ran out past me. I saw a dazzle of light, and then something floating serenely on the drifting surface of the layer of fog, like a flower. Do you smell anything? She asked, looking up at me. I inhaled. I think so. A summery sort of smell, like grass and privet hedges. She nodded. I said, It's very volatile, and there'll be a lot of it. When this little cryogen really gets started, it spreads fast. The CO2 is just what it needs for rapid growth. It was very cold, and it burned, and it stung my hands. Afterwards, I found frost-bitten patches on them. The fungus itself was beautiful. It was glittering, delicate stuff, icy white, and it was shaped like the frost flowers on a window pane. I put my arm around her waist and I held her, while the fungus, always more swiftly, grew down the corridor toward the armored men. And then the fungus leaped at them, almost joyously. The concentration of cold, frigidity around the hoses was a delicacy for them. And greedily, the crystalline fungal growth clustered and clung. In no time at all, the mouths of the hoses bore great choking pendant blobs of the stuff. This fungus was climbing cheerfully from the hoses, up along their armor and toward the faceplates of their cold-proof suits. I caught a great gush of the summer perfume, like white syringa and fresh-mown grass that the cold-loving growth gave out. And there you have it, the origin of brown mold. Deeper below these icy perils of the brown mold, we find the subterranean jarldom halls of the frost giant nobles. Due to the uncertainty of using illuminating warming flame here, down below the ice, we find that caged fire beetles, alive whenever possible, are used here for illumination. The Jarl's great entry hall is extensively carved with scenes of giant hunts and victories, telling us that Grugnur's ancestors have been situated here beneath the glacial rift for quite some time. We also learn that Grugnur himself has made alliance with white dragons. The dragons featured herein are pets of the Jarl and his wife, and are placated with guardianship over a significant amount of the Jarl's treasure. These dragons may have been forcefully subdued, or they might be born here or perhaps tamed young from previously subdued dragons. Consider David C. Sutherland III's main illustration for this module, which, despite its confusing perspective, does not actually show numerous adventurers fighting a dragon. Instead, if we look closely, it shows two human adventurers looking at a pair of great carvings on the wall of the Jarl's Great Hall. The right-hand carving portrays giants battling against a dragon, and one of them is heroically strangling the dragon, while another giant warrior grabs at one of its horns. As we have previously explored in the Castle Old Skull History series, Dungeons & Dragons' White Dragons were inspired by Tolkien's Cold Drakes, which Gary depicted as the Arctic dragon in his earlier contribution to the Tolkien fanzine entitled Thangorodrim in 1969. As we read there in his article Great Worms, This large white worm inhabits only the coldest regions of the far north and has no internal fire. Draco arcticus seeks glaciers in which to dwell, and if the temperature remains cold enough, they will sleep therein for very long periods of time, only awakening to feed when stimulated by warmth. This is a hint that perhaps these creatures hibernate extensively, even by the terms of dragon kind, and therefore white dragons might not need much food to survive. Further down in the Jarl's dungeon halls, we can also find a group of visiting ogre magi. These ogre magi are emissaries from the lord of their realm, which, from referring to the monster manual, likely indicates that they have come from GREYHAWK'S Nippon, mythic Japan. When we consider the Himalayan illusions represented by the yeti and the snow leopards, and the location of the crystal mists, this is actually not too surprising. In one of the more interesting encounters on this dungeon level, we also discover a beautiful storm giantess has been imprisoned and manipulated by the Jarl. We find a hint at the kinship that exists in classic Dungeons & Dragons between all giants, regardless of alignment, concerning politics, traditions, and disputes which lie far outside of the mortal realm of little folk concerns. Gary politely notes that Jarl Grugnur is hoping to, quote, tantalize her into submitting to the Jarl's will and becoming his leman, which means that he's locking her away. The quaint chivalric term, durance vile, actually means an extended prison sentence until she agrees to become his mistress. One indeed wonders what the Jarl's lady might have to say about that. Which brings up another interesting question. Why aren't there any hybrid half-giants, such as Hillstone rock giants or Stormfrost ice giants in the monster manual? That would be a nice project for the intrepid dungeon master, or perhaps a writer of old-school gaming supplements, if anybody wants a new writing idea. As another nice part of the art that is sometimes overlooked in this dungeon module, we also find David A. Trampier's meticulously faithful illustration of the Jarl Grugnur's trophy hall. The illustrated monster trophies match Gary's writing exactly, which makes the little drawing quite fascinating to study in detail. The trophies featured tell us that Jarl Grugnur and his near ancestors must have fought not only in the Crystal Mist Mountains, but also in a desert, along an icy sea, and perhaps even in the underworld. Beyond the trophy hall, we find another secret of giant leadership. Just like in the treasure hall, beneath Chieftain Nosnra's domain, there is a similar magical teleporter for the Jarl here. This one leads directly into Muspelheim, just outside the Hall of the Fire Giant King. Concerning this bit of echo and theme, it is curious that, unlike in Dungeon Modules G1 and G3, the Elder Elemental God is not mentioned in this module. Does Jarl Grugnur yet know that his superiors are worshipping it? We don't know. And the giants themselves, outside of weak shamanism displayed in the Dungeon Master's Guide, cannot really use much magic. So the hint is that this too is the magic of the drow, with the teleporter, or at least ancient magic uncovered by them and then reutilized to assist the giants. How long has the alliance between the giants been planned and prepared for? No one knows, but it must have been at least several years. I hope you have enjoyed this series of episodes exploring the G2 Glacial Rift module. At 8 meager pages, it can certainly stand to be further strengthened with additional muscle upon the bone, as Gary recommends. But the original as it stands is a classic, and that we can all agree on. It can be made better with deeper understanding, but it inspired this writing and over 2 hours of episodes of my research, simply because of its original depth and greatness. So I hope you have enjoyed this exploration of GREYHAWK'S Glacial Rift as much as I have. I will see you next time on HAWK and More. Take care.